and welcome to Bloody Good Reads. I'm your host, Mark Goddard, and this week we're going to delve back into the world of fantasy. This week's guest was brought up by a previous guest on the show before, and that's what piqued my interest, because Rebel Skies is our first book, and it is an amazing Studio Ghibli style Japanese mythology, full of amazing kind of fantasy work. And I wanted to kind of get the author on this week to chat about the book and find out her inspirations behind it. And of course, find her free bloody good reads. So, welcome to the podcast this week, Ann Sei Lin.
Hi, thank you. It's really good to be here.
All right. So, what we like to do here on Bloody Good Reads is get authors to pick 3 books that they love, because I do like to make people work for it on this podcast. But before we get into kind of your amazing book, Rebel Skies, and the brand new book that's coming out in July, what I like to ask every guest as they come on is, how did you get into the fantasy genre?
I think it started very young. They get you when you're young. So when I was a kid, my mom hated buying me. She was very frugal, so she hated buying me anything, except the one exception was books, because she thought that would, be educational and help me get ahead with my grades and things like that. So I fully took advantage of her willingness to spend money on books. And I asked her to buy me a bunch of things, and a lot of them tended to be fantasy. And I think I caught the bug very early on. So I started with these big doorstoppers. I had no right reading at my age, probably. Things like The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan had far too much sex. If only my mum knew. And yeah, it went on from there.
Wheel of Time was on my list of books I really wanted to try when I was younger, and I had it there, but it's such a big book.
Yeah, it's very chunky.
Awesome. So, what was it that made you want to become kind of a fantasy writer yourself? Was you quite kind of keen writer when you were growing up, or was it more of kind of a thing, kind of more in your adult life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really liked writing, and mainly it was because I liked creating my own worlds, and I think that is a great part of fantasy, is all the different worlds that you can explore, and that was the core appeal when I was young. It was just a world building thing, and as I grew older, it became more about story and character, along with all these exciting new worlds.
I'm looking at your website as well. So you're saying you're a gamer as well. So I'm assuming you're an RPG fan. So does that kind of a bit of inspiration kind of come from that side of it as well? Or?
Oh yes, definitely. You hit that on the head. I'm 100% an RPG fan.
Final Fantasy and stuff like that, or are you going a bit more deeper into the JRPG world?
Oh, I feel like I've been exposed. Yes, a lot of Final Fantasy.
Same here, huge Final Fantasy fan, so don't worry, we don't judge you. Awesome. Okay, so when did the idea for Rebel Skies come about? Because it says again on your website, it's a very Ghibli kind of inspired, and the whole origami feel to the book as well, and which is what I love about it. What kind of when did the idea for that one come about?
I often say that it's happened one day when I got a really bad paper cut, and I thought, oh, I could die from this probably. But also, I really like origami, and I do it in my spare time, even though I'm very bad at it. And it was also a mix of wanting to showcase this part of sort of East Asian culture, which is a little bit lesser known, and the idea of having something that is very fragile and easily destroyed, like paper, being a source of power, I thought was very interesting. So it was really a mix of all these different things sort of coming together to create one unified idea of what if people could kill each other with post-it notes.
And was it always going to be a trilogy, or was it kind of when you finished Skies, you went to go on and do kind of more after that?
Yes, it was always planned to be a trilogy. So when I talked to my agent at the very first time I talked to my agent, I said this is going to be a trilogy, and I have my outlines here. This is the entire book. So she knew from very early on that the entire shape that the series would take.
So before we go into the story behind the book and the brand new book, again, what we like to do here on the podcast is ask authors to pick 3 books they love. So, what is your first book that you brought along today?
Oh, so if you asked me this any other day, my answers are going to change. But for today, so the 3 books would be The Girl with No Soul by Morgan Owen, which
Who
is
is the author who recommended you in the first place? You're one of her picks as well.
yeah, we have a little tit for tat going. We have to recommend each other. It's I think it's a great sort of classical YA, and it has this really lovely sense of atmosphere and mystery, which builds up around the main character who is essentially looking for pieces of her soul, and it's a really wonderful. It's got all the classic YA beats. It's got the romance, it's got the mystery, it's got the sort of young people rising up against an oppressive regime kind of thing. So yeah, it's if you like classic YA, I recommend it.
Very good pick, and a very good author as well. She was absolutely lovely on the podcast. So again, if she didn't say about your book, I would not have known about it. So yeah, to go check that one out, definitely. And if you listen to Morgan's episode as well, you can find out a bit more about the book from that as well. Awesome. So, Rebel Skies. Tell us a little bit about the plot of the book without spoiling too much.
The story is about a girl called Kurara who has the ability to control paper with her mind. And that power is something that she keeps a secret as she works as a servant on this floating banquet hall in the sky. And she's lived there for most of her life with her best friend Haru until one day this origami dragon attacks and Haru's really badly injured. So in order to save his life, she sort of agrees to a deal which will take her to the Sky Cities, where she will meet someone who she thinks will be able to help save her best friend. And while she's on this quest, she learns more about how to use her paper magic and more about the world around her and what these paper creatures that attack people really are.
Very Ghibli, kind of very Asian mythology in there as well. So it's a really nice mix, and I'm glad it's a trilogy because it works well as a kind of a possible 3 book story. Cool. So your second book is coming out July 6th,
Yes,
I believe.
I think so. Yes, it should be. Hopefully, if nothing goes wrong.
So for people who have read the first book, where are we kind of going into in the second book? Again, without being too spoilery, but whereabouts is the story kind of heavy heading into that one?
That's a good question. Without being too spoilery, um, so Kurara and the others are going to find out a lot more about Shikigami and what exactly they are. And also, Kurara is going to find out more about who she is. So, if anybody's read the first book, there's a big question about her past and her memory. And she's going to explore a lot more about that and why exactly she has these certain things about her memory. I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but yes, that's about it.
Basically, if you haven't read the first book, read the first book. Definitely read the first
Yes.
book. Awesome. So I'm going to have to ask it. What RPGs do you kind of put as some of your best ones? Because I'm a huge JRPG fan, huge Final Fantasy fan, huge Wild Arms fan, that kind of thing. So whereabouts, which ones do you kind of really rate highly, and any of them could really inspire you for this kind of story?
I think I've got about 100 hours into Persona 5, but all the Personas are good.
See, that's the one I've never tried.
Oh, it's great. Although it will suck all your life away, so maybe don't try
Oh, it's fine. Awesome.
yeah, the Persona is like this life simulator slash dungeon crawler set,
Mm,
during our modern times. And Rebel Skies is very much a sort of industrial revolution Japan with
mm.
skyships and floating cities in the clouds.
Little kind of Final Fantasy 9-ish kind of thing.
Yeah, it's sort of
Steampunky
yeah.
kind of. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. So with the Ghibli kind of inspiration as well, I'm assuming you're a fan of the Ghibli movies.
Yes, definitely. I've got a lot of people have said that they feel a lot of Laputa Castle in the Sky vibes from Rebel Skies.
Mm.
I I don't know how true that is. I have seen Laputa, but it's been a long time, so I can't really remember.
It's not one of their best ones, but yeah. I mean, the cover art gives me House Moving Castle vibes for the first book, but
Ah, yes,
that's just me personally. But yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. So let's go on to your second book then. What was your second book choice that you were bringing along today?
Um, ah, so the second book is going to be Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. It's a Asian fantasy about a woman who enters a competition to become the imperial tailor at the emperor's palace,
Mhm.
and in doing so, she sort of uncovers some old conspiracy that she gets wrapped up in. And yeah, it's very magical.
So what about your third book choice then? So what was your third one you were going to suggest to us this week?
My third one is going to be Big Bad Me, which is these are all very different books.
I can tell.
um,
Not the first time on
so,
the podcast we had that.
yeah, there's no theme to this. Not all Asian fantasy or all this, but yes, the third one would be Big Bad Me, which is sort of an ode to sort of classical Buffy style Scooby Gang supernatural
Mhm.
mystery. It is very, very fun and very funny. I don't laugh a lot when I read books, but this one made me
Mhm.
chuckle a few times.
Little Buffy style humour. So obviously you're working on your third book as well. But is there any plans on a new series after the Rebel Skies trilogy, or are you just literally putting all your energies into this series?
It's funny that you should say that because this morning, instead of doing what I should be doing, which is writing more of the third book, I've been working on something new, and that thing is about uh, a world where time, the god of time, has sort of died, and as a result, time is really messed up and doesn't
Mm.
work the way it should. And so these two people are on this quest to sort of restore the fabric of time. And I think that's about all I can say about it right now.
Awesome, awesome. So that is Rebel Skies, which is out now. Highly recommend picking it up. I picked it up through Christmas through talking to Morgan. Um, really enjoying the book. I'm about halfway through because, as you guys know, I'm awful at finishing stuff. But highly recommend it. It's full of that. If you're a fan of jrpgs and you're a fan of kind of Ghibli style movies, you'll fall in love with this book. I actually fell in love with this from the cover onwards. So do go and check it out. And the new book is out in July 6th, which is I've forgotten the title already because I am awful. Rebel Fire, which
That's
can be
right.
pre-ordered as well over on Ann's website as well. Um, so huge thank you for coming on the podcast this week. Is there anything else you would like to promote or push, or where can people find you?
Yes, people can find me on Twitter as at Ann Sei Lin 1. That's the number one. And also on Instagram, where I post very infrequently as Ann Sei Lin 1 as well. Or there's always my website, which is very boringly annseilin.co.uk.
Awesome. Brilliant. Again, thank you for coming on to have a chat about Rebel Skies. Again, go pick up the book, go and pre-order the new book as well if you do enjoy the first book as well. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. As always, a huge thank you to you guys for listening to the podcast as well. You can catch us over at Bloody Good Reads over on Twitter, Bloody Good Reads over on Instagram as well. Yeah, and come and tell us what your favourite Japanese fantasy is, and tell us a little bit about your love of fantasy as well, because we don't do an awful lot of fantasy on the podcast. I want to do more, but yeah, it's nice to have some more of this kind of subgenre on here as well, especially if you like the YA part of the kind of the fantasy world too. So again, huge thanks to Anne for coming on the podcast. I've been your host, Mike Goddard, and I'll see you next time.